So it's 2 o'clock and it's Public Accountability Board for July. Welcome. I think we will do a quick introduction, which we don't always do, but we'll do that today. So Alan Billings, PCC.
Michael Lewis, Chair, Independent Ethics Panel. Good afternoon.
Steve Wright, Chair of the Joint Independent Audit Committee.
McCollum, Temporary ACC, Criminal Justice and Custody.
Lauren Poultney, Chief Constable.
I'm Jackie Bolland, I'm the Assistant Chief Officer for Resources.
Lindsay Butterfield, Chief Superintendent and District Commander for Sheffield.
Ben Kemp, Superintendent for Sheffield.
Debbie Quentin, Chief Finance Officer for Farms.
Hi, I'm Angela Greenwood, I'm the Partnership Manager of the South Yorkshire Violence Reduction Unit.
Sharon Baldwin, Evaluation and Scrutiny Officer in the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner.
Sally Parkin, Governance and Compliance Manager for the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner.
OPCC Chief Executive.
Do you have a name?
Michelle Good.
And we've got Sophie Abbott online, and we have others online as well, but they're not all revealed. I thought we'd do that, Lindsay, partly for your sake, because this is the first time I think you've been to the PAB as, probably not the first time you've been to PAB, but the first time you've been as the District Commander for Sheffield, so we welcome you in that capacity, and you're going to present a report shortly. Just one or two other things, if I may. We are being filmed, and that will be uploaded on the website in due course. Announcements. I thought we'd done with the trees, but I need to read some words which will be incorporated in the minutes ongoing, so that future historians who come to look up the whole issue of the trees dispute in Sheffield and the role of the police and the PCC in that, they'll have a record of that for them to look at. So if I can do that, if it sounds as if I'm reading something, it's principally because I am reading something. So the Sheffield trees controversy was a traumatic time for the city of Sheffield, considerably damaging the reputation of the City Council, upsetting many residents. The Council commissioned an inquiry into the dispute, chaired by Sir Mark Lowcock, and we reported about that earlier in the year. Along with South Yorkshire Police, I personally gave evidence to the inquiry, as did the former chair of our Independent Ethics Panel, Andrew Lockley, who provided me with an independent assurance report on the police involvement in the trees dispute. Sir Mark Lowcock found that the Council had not conducted themselves well, and among other things said they should apologise to residents generally and to some individuals and organisations specifically, and that included ourselves. And Sir Mark Lowcock also commended Andrew and myself, police, for our contribution to his inquiry. So, on Monday 19th of June, Sheffield City Council presented a report to its Strategy and Resources Policy Committee about the trees dispute. The report contained full and frank acceptance that the Council had made mistakes, needed to say sorry, hope for a new era of properly listening to and engaging with citizens, and openness and transparency. And then agenda item 5 reads, South Yorkshire Police and South Yorkshire Police and Crime Commissioner, Dr. Alan Billings. The inquiry made it clear that the Council placed the police in an invidious position during the dispute. At times the Council placed undue pressure on the police and did not do enough to find alternative solutions to the dispute or to play a visible role on the streets during the protests. The Police and Crime Commissioner called for a political resolution to the dispute several times. His advice should have been heeded. And then following the June Council the committee meeting, I received a written apology from the leader and the Chief Executive of the Sheffield City Council, as did the Chief Constable. We've both written back to the Council accepting their apologies and saying that they hope we can now all move on. So we'll incorporate that in our notes, in our minutes of the meeting. Other announcements, Safer Streets 5, round 5 of the Safer Streets Fund is announced today in Parliament. I think there's an official launch of that on Monday, but there is more money coming our way, about £1.4 million, I think, something of that sort, to be distributed as equitably as we can across the districts, but that means more work around, probably around CCTV and street lighting, that sort of thing. So it's all very good, and not competitive this time. You don't make bids, we're going to get the money. Well, you do have to make your bid, and get that agreed, but we're going to get the money, so that's good stuff. And finally, just to note the very sad death of a former Chief Executive of Sheffield City Council, Lord Kerslake, who I knew, many of us knew personally, great public servant, a resident of Sheffield. Even though he moved to be head of the civil service, he always kept a house here. I'm just very sorry to hear about his death, and we know that. Public questions, don't think there are any, Sally.
No.
Urgent items, not aware of any. And items to be considered in the absence of the public and the press, don't think there are any of those. So moving on to declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Item 7. Just so that you're aware, those of you in the room, a member of the public has joined us who is very welcome. We won't identify you, but you're very welcome. Have you got a copy of the papers that we've got today?
No.
I don't know whether we can get you something so that you know what we're talking about, and that would be helpful probably. You're very welcome. So that was declaration of interest. Item 8 are the minutes of the meeting of PAB held on the 4th of May, pages 5 to 10. Anybody want to comment on the minutes? If not, can we accept those as an accurate account? We're not keeping minutes so much these days as notes of meetings, but they're minutes. Okay. Matters arising and actions. Don't think there are any, Sally, so that's very swift. So we're on to item 10 then, which is forced performance. This is the Sheffield District summary update, and Lindsay, this is why you're here. So this is for a moment in the sun, or something like that. You probably know that what we do, we don't slavishly go through page by page, but I pick out one or two things that have occurred to us. And there may be things that you want to comment on that you're always very welcome to do that, probably at the end when you answered our questions. I should say that a member of the public has written to me saying that they have read this and read all our reports, and I've noted what they've said to me, and I'll try and reflect that in the questions that I put. So that was interesting. I think that's the first time we've had a member of the public in advance with questions. We sometimes get it afterwards. So I'm on page 11, trust and confidence, first of all. This is item 4. So I'm looking at 4.2. You talk there about we have replicated good practice from Doncaster and invited our leaders to make a leadership pledge, individual pledges you talk about. I just want you to say a word about how you measure that, and how you know that that's working. Just something around the leadership pledges.
Absolutely. So my understanding, because some of this work started before I rejoined South Yorkshire Police, but each of our sergeants and inspectors have been asked to outline the standards that they're setting for themselves and their team, and that's in line with our force values. And it goes into some detail about tangibly what they are going to do differently to make sure that they are living and breathing the force values. So they complete those as individuals, and then we collect them, look for the commonalities, and that becomes their teamship document. So we've got our force, vision and values, but sitting beneath that is a list of the detail of how our leaders are going to act and behave to make sure that they mirror and that their behaviours are in line with how we want to operate as a force. So that's where we're currently at. We've got some intentions to pull all of that together into our next leadership days, and we're looking at how we can start to measure that, perhaps through some PDR objectives for the team, and how we can reality test to make sure that what they've pledged to undertake is what's happening on a daily basis.
Okay, so they clearly got to reflect the overarching values, but they can be quite different then within the...
Absolutely. So we have command team pledges, don't we, on our corridor, and that's each of the members of the command team have said what they're going to do as a result of considering the force values and their personal leadership contribution. So for example, it might be that we take more time to be visible at briefings and to listen to our team. It might be that we reflect more on our personal style and approach, that we engage and seek more feedback from our teams, for example, but it can be very personal.
Okay. That's helpful, thank you. I'm over the page on page 12, 4.4. You refer there to a mobile beat bus. We really sat up when we saw this. I mean, if you tell us something about that and
So
how you let people know the beat bus is on the beat.
I'm really pleased Ben sat next to me. He knows more about detail than I do at the moment. But my understanding is there are times and dates and locations that are advertised in advance through social media and other communication channels, which give the public information about where we will be, so they can come and have that face-to-face engagement if that's what they would like to do. And I think it's also tailored to the areas as well, in terms of the concerns of the area might mean that we actually take partners with us on that initiative as well, if that's appropriate to the issues that they're facing.
Okay.
We do get, it works really well with our elder community as well, so we tend to find that as a really good engagement tool for those that are perhaps over 65 and maybe not utilising other platforms around engagement.
Okay, thank you. Same page 4.8, this is talking about embedding stronger connections with our black communities. Are these black communities, are they geographical locations you're talking about here, or is this the communities spread across the city? And just a word about how you're doing that and how you'll keep that going.
I think it's both, to be fair, Commissioner. I think we've tried to be really balanced in our report in terms of what we're doing well and where we know our gaps are. And we know locally and nationally that engagement with black communities is perhaps a room for improvement for policing. So using the police race action plan and the structures around that, we're looking at how we can enhance our current offer within Sheffield. And again, Ben's done an awful lot of work in this area, but just over the page, at the top of page 13, we've outlined the fact that we are using some of our existing community groups as a route into those communities. So the awareness event that was undertaken at Sadaka, where we met members of the community from the Congo, Rwanda, Kenya, etc., but really tailoring our approach to the issues that those communities are raising. So that's the starting point, but there is a lot of work in that space. And I don't know, Ben, as the race action plan lead, is there anything in addition?
Yeah, so we've been fortunate in having an approval for some dedicated resources to do some specific work around this with an inspector. Part of that is we've been undertaking mapping exercises, so understanding where our current engagement is, identifying gaps within that, and then seeking how we can address that. We've engaged through stakeholder organisations, and that's identified for us as perhaps a need to engage at a more grassroots level and be really sort of out and visible at some of the events that are of significance and importance. So recently we attended on Windrush Day an event in partnership with Sheffield City Council where we had a police stall and engaged with over 200 members of the black community who were there to celebrate the successes of people descending from Windrush generations, and we were able to talk about the impact that Windrush has had on policing locally, and obviously share wider information around recruitment and other activities that allow people from all communities to engage with us.
And there are many of those, aren't there? Because I was at a Kenyan group the other day who are quite different from the Zimbabwean group that I was meeting before that, and so it goes on. But
We're quite cautious not to homogenise black communities into a single entity, because we're aware that there's a whole subset within that.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I'm on page 14 now, which is neighbourhood crime 6.11, and you talk there about the neighbourhood crime team, which I was interested in, and I just wonder if you could again say something about the relationship between the neighbourhood crime team and the neighbourhood teams and how that all works.
Yeah, absolutely. So our neighbourhood crime team has been established to focus on burglary, residential, so house burglary, robbery, and also vehicle crime, particularly where that's a series. So that could be theft of motor vehicle, it could be theft from motor vehicle, but where we're seeing a series within a locality, then we would ask the team to have an overview of that and to be able to make those links between the offences and pursue the offenders. It's a mixture of detectives and constables, police constables, uniform constables, and we are really looking at developing that approach to target our prolific offenders, because we know the people that commit these crimes don't typically commit one offence, they commit a number of offences. So having that really focused approach on our suspects and offenders with a view to improving our outcomes but improving the quality of the service that we're delivering to the public as well. So that's the
So these are prolific offenders that are being
They
targeted?
tend to be,
essentially?
yeah, they do tend to be. And the team will focus on things like forensic hits as well and make sure that we're prioritising the arrest of the people that we know are committing those crimes. So that's the makeup of the team. They are currently aligned to geographical areas, so really strong link in with the neighbourhood policing team. So your neighbourhood policing team will perhaps have a problem-solving plan for an area if we know there is a series of offences within that area, and they're working really closely with the neighbourhood crime team to make sure that the work complements each other rather than duplication. So neighbourhood crime team are predominantly offender focused, neighbourhood policing teams are high visibility patrols and problem solving in that locality.
And how do they relate to the integrated offender management work?
So I believe that's all brought together through some of the governance structures that we have within the investigations portfolio in Sheffield. So we've got the investigation superintendent and detective chief inspector who oversee all of those teams, so neighbourhood crime team and IOM, and making sure that we're targeting the right people. Integrated offender management cohort in Sheffield is lower than we would like it to be, and we are currently undertaking a review of the resourcing of that team and also their operating processes, because we think there are perhaps more people that should be in that cohort than we've got currently. So we're linking across with some of the other districts that are performing particularly well to take the best practice from them and embed that in Sheffield. So that is an area that we're working on at the moment.
Okay, thank you. I'm on the same page, demand 6.2.3, 6.2.2 as well. And a member of the public says it's all very well, some of these things, but I need a better sense of the context here. Sheffield District experiences on average 400 crimes per month. Is that a lot, a little? Some feel for how, should we be worried about this? Is it, do you see what I mean?
Of residential burglary?
Yes.
Yeah, 400 offences of residential burglary. I would always say as the district commander that's higher than where I would want it to be.
I'm sure you would,
and I think
we
that
congratulate you for saying that. But in terms of, other cities, I don't know what your comparator would be, but is that a lot, or is it more than it was? Is it going up? Is it going down? That sort of feel I think the public want.
In terms of comparisons with other cities, I would probably need to take that away and come back with a more detailed answer. I think it's probably sufficient to say that it is an area of concern for us, and that's why we've got the dedicated resource through the neighbourhood crime team to really tackle those people that are causing that harm in our community.
A similar question then is 6.2.3, there are currently 245 active investigations held in the neighbourhood crime team. Caseloads averaging 18 investigations. Is the 18, they're the live investigation? Have they got other investigations which they're also in there?
Yes, absolutely.
What does the total look like?
I wouldn't have the accurate figure for today to hand. I can obviously provide that, but
sounds a lot is where I'm going to.
It absolutely is, and I think before the neighbourhood crime team were established, those investigations were sitting within response teams and perhaps being dealt with in isolation. So the benefit of bringing that all into one team is you've got oversight of trends, of perpetrators, and able to robustly manage those investigations. I think the point that we're trying to make there is that once we secure a charge and we put somebody before a court, our involvement doesn't then end. So we've got our live investigations which we are looking to get to charging point or outcome point, but also a number of cases that are within the court process now that we are still heavily involved in before that matter perhaps goes to trial.
Yeah. I'm on to page 15, and this is a member of the public again, 6.4.3, saying, you say there, to date we've seen some reduction on the volume of theft from motor vehicle offences. We've not yet seen the improvement in our outcomes that we had expected. And I think what they're asking is, well, what are the numbers here? What do you expect, etc., etc. But all about numbers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, what are you comparing it with?
So through our regular governance meetings, we review our outcome rate for neighbourhood crime. Theft of motor vehicle and theft from motor vehicle is particularly low within the district, and some of that is due to the nature of the offending, and actually it's very difficult from the CCTV perspective. We don't always get any forensics from the scene, for example, and there can be some challenges in progressing those investigations. So we would expect perhaps that to be lower than perhaps dwelling burglary, for example. But by bringing those offences into our neighbourhood crime team and having that targeted approach, we would expect to see our outcomes higher than where they are currently. And they are, for the last 2-week period, the data that was shared with me yesterday, sometimes as low as 1% in relation to vehicle offences. So that is a real concern for us. And we're looking at how we can bolster the team, not just with the detective resource, because we know that's a challenge in terms of our numbers, but actually how can we start to support the team with uniform resource so that we can really start to focus on vehicle crime and start to see those improvements. And that's overlaid with some targeted problem solving that features further in the pack as well around vehicle crime across the district.
Okay. On page 17, 6.8.3, government-funded Changing Futures programme continues to work with intensive support for a cohort of complex individuals, all about homelessness, etc. Again, I wonder if you could just say a little bit about the work with homelessness. It's something that the public are always raising with me, what they see in the city centre in particular, just how that's going.
So that is a real area of focus between our neighbourhood team and our partners. We have some really positive approaches in Sheffield, for example, Team Around the Person, which is a partnership approach looking at putting that individual's needs at the centre of everything we do and having a really tailored approach based on their needs. Actually, since the report was written and submitted, we now know that Sheffield's one of the 6 locations for the Homewards initiative, which is the 5-year programme launched by His Royal Highness Prince William. And we anticipate significant funding into the city and a further partnership response around homelessness. I think the ambition of that programme is to end homelessness within those localities. It's very early stages. I think we've only been aware for just under a week now that actually we feature as one of those locations.
Is that targeted at the cities? Well, how is it targeted?
So it's geographical, so it's for Sheffield, is my understanding. We've only just been invited to the partnership meetings now where we're starting to tailor what that will look like locally, and more than happy to bring some more information back once we understand that in more detail. But significant investment for the city that's really welcomed.
So it's his charity directly working with SYP and the council presumably on homelessness?
Yeah, so to date...
And the voluntary sector are involved?
Absolutely, so it is a multi-agency response. It had been kept relatively tight, so it had been the charity and Sheffield City Council until the formal announcement, which was last week. But now the council are looking at how we can start to set up and establish multi-agency meetings to bring in all key partners and the voluntary sector to work together.
Yes, I think we'd be interested in hearing how that's going at some point. Yeah, thank you. If I go on then to, let's have a look, the next page, 19. Oh, these graphs. I get trouble with graphs. I don't always know what they're telling me, and I'm not sure what this one's telling me. Let's see if you can tell me what it's telling me.
So that outlines the number of emergency calls for service that we receive as a district, which, as you can see, is relatively stable. It then breaks down the dispatch time. So from the point of that call coming into our control room to an officer attending that scene, it tells us how long that takes and breaks that down into how long that calls with each department. So you can see that the first section within each of the bars is yellow. That's the time it takes for our call handler to actually document the detail from the call taker. We've then got our dispatch time, which is the amount of time it takes for that incident to be passed over the radio and a resource allocated. And district time is the time at which the officer is on their way to and dealing with that incident. So that's what the chart shows. And then the line across the top shows the volume of incidents.
So if I look at that as a graph, and look at the black line and the relationship between the black line and the bars, there is no correlation. But that's not what the narrative tells me.
Just expand on that from the Commissioner.
Well, what you say is what I've just said is what I think it is, and then the narrative says something different, doesn't it?
So the narrative talks about making sure that we're maximising the number of resources we have available so that we can attend those calls as quickly as possible.
Well, I'll leave you to go and have a look at that and see what you make of it, relating the narrative to the graph.
Okay.
And just on the question of response times, and the problem seems to be sending officers out. You haven't got the officers to send, or the call handler and able to send anybody. Is that the issue when you onto this?
So we have had some real challenges around our deployable resource. Some of that is linked to the number of student officers that we have and where they are in their student journey, essentially. And I think we have talked about that in this forum previously. We know that our students have to undertake a number of different attachments before they are signed off. So we're looking at how we can do that in a way that means that they are on response for as long as possible to give us that resilience. We also know that the change in the way in which we recruit student officers means that they're not deployable for sometimes 2 or even 3 years into their employment journey, and that's caused some challenges. So we're working really closely with our training function, and we're working really closely with our duties team to make sure that we've got resilience at the key times and that we can meet our service level agreement for attendance at immediate grades and priority grades. So for example, through the summer, we've looked at how we can not halt their attachments to other teams, but how we can time them to make sure that we've got as many staff available at times of peak demand as possible. We've also looked, for example, at, as I've said, keeping them on response for as long as we can do. We've looked at summer surge. We're not undertaking summer surge this year, but actually making sure that we are timing abstractions outside of that key demand period, and that we are ensuring we've got as many resources available as possible through that time of peak demand. In September, for example, we know we will start to see our students become fully deployable resources, and I know we've waited a long time for that. The work that we've done at district level shows our response function will be very close to fully resourced, certainly by October, November, which is a real positive for us, and we will start to see a real focus then on our response team's timeliness of attendance, because we know we've got the resources to be able to deliver that consistently, and that features as part of our plans as a district command team.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to hear you at another occasion then, just if there's no correlation between demand and response time, what's making the difference here? That's the question I had in my mind when I looked at this.
So some of that, Commissioner, is the complexity of the incidents that we're dealing with. Okay. So if you take, for example, the incident earlier this week where we had the individual on the crane on Pond Street, that committed, I think, 20 resources initially to close roads, to keep the public safe, to engage with partners. That's a huge chunk of our resource who are all engaged on one incident. And obviously then I haven't got 20 officers deployable to other incidents. So some of it is not just incident volume, it's actually the complexity within that and understanding some of that context.
Was that a happy ending in the end? I mean, the person was got down
negotiated down safely, and he's since been charged with a number of offences.
Okay, thank you. Page 20, I had to puzzle over this quite a while. This is events and operations 7.31. Your operation Duxford obviously did a sweep of Meadowhall, amongst other places, I think, and turned out 50 children who were not in school. And that made me think, well, what do you do with them when you come across these children? I've had a bit of an exclamation from Andrew actually about the 50 children. They're not all what I thought they were, i.e. on the loose. They seem to be mainly with parents, so there's a lot of condoned truancy or absence about that, but did raise the question about what you do when you come across children. So
in addition to the initial welfare check that you would expect, it's then engaging with partners to understand and share information. sometimes that will feature as part of a bigger jigsaw, so actually that little bit of information that we can offer in terms of where that child was on that day may well fit with an intelligence picture we've got, for example, around either sexual exploitation or criminal exploitation, or may feature and support partners in some information that they've got and help them take forward under their powers and policies. So that would typically look like physical welfare check of the child on the day, actually are they safe and well, why are they there, why are they not in school, and then an information sharing exercise with partners, as well as potentially returning that child home or to school, whichever is most appropriate.
It did lead me to ask the question of, are the academies, do they have a duty to report missing children to somebody, local authority? So, Andrew, I don't know whether you can help us with that. I think the answer is no, though in fact they do. Is that, would that be
sort of
more or less it?
Yeah, Commission. So there's no actual duty, statutory expectation that an academy can notify the local authority. However, they do, because they put data in. So they do at least fortnightly, data's transferred so that the local authority be aware quite quickly about an absent child. But some academies also have their own officers that go out actually onto the streets and look for pupils that are not in school. So they've actually got their own, doing their own safe and well checks. So there are academies that do have their own staff doing that as well.
But not all.
Not all.
And that seems something missing there then, if some do, some don't.
They all do safe and well checks, all the academies, but some actually have officers that will go out, staff that will go out.
So they're like the old education officers that I remember in my youth, who used to knock on your door and ask you whether you went to school, something like that.
Did they catch you off now?
Not that we ever believed he wasn't in school.
It depends on the governance. I used to chair an academy, and it depends on the governance of the academy themselves, and the one that I chaired sent people out on a daily basis to look for children that should have been attending school. Obviously not in Sheffield district, it was in Barnsley. But that was what they did, and they then present those figures to the governing bodies of each one of the schools. But have a relationship with the local authority and the force.
Yeah.
I think it's worth making two observations, if I may. One is that since...
You should declare your interest.
As a former teacher, head teacher for 35 years, but that's in the past. I think there are two things. Clearly, since the pandemic, the number of children not in school nationally has risen, and it's a matter of national concern. The other issue is that, unlike in the past, the local authority, and I think this is what you were getting at, the local authority no longer has the capacity to have the information readily at hand because of the academisation programme. And I guess you're talking primarily about secondary school age children, where virtually every single school in Sheffield is now an academy, and therefore there are different practices operating in each individual school. So the school bobby, to use the term that you're referring to, was provided by the local authority, and it is now up to each individual academy business to decide whether they want to invest in that or say it's somebody else's problem. And I think probably from a practical point of view it makes this a much more difficult issue for yourself than it might necessarily be in the past.
Yeah, and the school bobby was feared. Well,
somewhere.
I feared the school bobby. Mine was. Okay, thank you very much for that. I'm on page 23 now at the top. Oh, another comment by a member of the public. This is the little graph, not graph, the table at the top. They're saying, what's it all about? Arrest rates, isn't it, of domestic abuse. And they were saying, well, what are the numbers? Which seems a fair question. I mean, 100% of nothing is nothing, so we want to know what it's 88% of and so on.
I haven't got the specific numbers, but I'm sure we can get those during the meeting.
Well, there might be something to bear in mind for other
digging.
future reports.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
This doesn't necessarily convey what you
No
think
problem.
it conveys.
We can provide that information.
We can put it in the minutes if it's into.
Perfect, thank you.
And just on that though, I mean, the 88, the high arrest rates for the high offenders on the right hand side are not the 90% which you aspire to, aren't they? So there's a problem there.
So we track our outstanding high-risk domestic abuse perpetrators daily now through our daily management meeting, so that we understand how many people are outstanding, and then there is governance around the actions that are being undertaken on a daily basis to locate those people and arrest them. So you're absolutely right, Commissioner, it's not the 90% that we aspire to, but that is an area now of daily focus within our command team meetings and governance structures to see those improvements.
And it seems to be going down, not
So
even
June will always be lower because it was just the first 12 days of that month.
Well, I think in May.
And some of it is a systems issue, because it requires the individual to be linked and a certain box to be ticked on our system. So what we'll typically see is that although May is showing us 80%, actually by the time we've got to charge and we've got some positive outcomes for those people, that will increase retrospectively, which isn't ideal, but that is a challenge that we've got in our current system.
That's a tricky one to explain to the public, I think, if we present a table and a long explanation, which is all about difficult, but yeah, okay. Towards the bottom of the page on 8.3.1, Clare's Law, where there seems to be a drop-off there, just wonder whether you had a comment on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Clare's Law is a piece of legislation that means that people have an opportunity to ask the police about their current partner and any concerns that they might have, and if certain criteria are met, we can release information to them with a view to keeping them safe. There are two ways in which that law is enacted. It's either right to know or right to ask. So right to ask, clearly, if I've got a right as a member of the public, but right to know where we as a service do. Again, certain criteria is met, and really strong controls around that, as you would expect, then we can share that information with individuals. As it's saying there, we have seen an increase in the demand through that, which I think is actually a really positive thing, because it shows that we're disclosing that information and discharging our obligations to keep people safe. But it has caused us some challenges in terms of being able to fulfil those obligations in a timely manner. So DCI Jim Bateman has looked at our process and now currently allocated all of those into the PVP, the Protecting Vulnerable Persons Department, and again we are tracking that on a daily basis through our daily management meetings, so I understand how many are outstanding, how old they are, and I can ensure that we've got that compliance around timeliness. So this week I think we have 4 outstanding, all of which are fairly recent, so we're in a much better position than we were. Just giving that visibility now on a daily basis and weekly into our command team, so that we can ensure that we're
So an improving.
And Commissioners probably worth noting, comparatively we have the highest rates in the country.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. The final question I've got is on page 25. 8.5.4, you talk about there are currently 32 active organised crime groups in Sheffield. I just wondered, are they all managed by the Fortified team? Is that...
It depends on the severity of the offending, Commissioner, so predominantly yes. However, we do look to force resources, for example through crime services portfolio, for support with some of our high risk. So for example, that could be an organised crime group that's firearms enabled, and that would quite rightly sit within the armed crime team within the crime services portfolio. But by and large, the daily disruption is undertaken through our fortified teams in conjunction with our neighbourhood policing teams.
Okay, thank you very much. Don't think I've got anything else. I don't know whether anyone else has any questions, or whether you want to say anything else.
I think, having read and reread the graphs on page 19
Good
and 20 a couple of times, I may be able to assist.
Oh.
Maybe. But you're right, they're quite complicated in the way in which they're portrayed. And I think it would be helpful if the graph on page 19 and the graph on page 20 were together to enable comparison. Because if you look at the graph on page 20, which is about emergency response times, so there's a real consistency there with officers getting to calls. No matter the volume of the calls, we are getting to them in about 10 minutes, which is our target, obviously, but we are prioritising that. So where you see lower demand, for example, the week of the 1st of May, over Leaf, you see on that week that actually our response times to priorities are really good, and we're looking there about the hour mark. On the couple of weeks later, on the 15th, where there's a spike in demand on emergencies, we're still getting to emergencies in our target time, but you see a subsequent impact on delays in getting to priority calls. So I think there's a way in which we need to present this data in the future which makes that kind of linkage more clear. Because I did have to do some mental gymnastics around that.
Bear in mind, it's it isn't me that read them, but it's
for the
essentially
public,
it's the public who read these things, and it's not immediately clear.
No, then when you said it, I sort of had to go over it a couple of times. I'm sure I understood that, but now I'm not sure that I do. But I think that is the linkage. When we've worked really hard to make sure the emergencies are prioritised because they're life at risk, they're crimes in progress. The subsequent impact is on our ability to respond in a more timely way to the priority calls.
Great, thank you very much.
So action discharge within the meeting.
Thank you.
I wish I could have said it at the time, but it's scratching my head.
Nevertheless, some homework in there. I think so.
There is.
Thank you very much. Unless there's something you wanted to raise or mention.
No, I don't think so, Commissioner. I think we've pulled out all this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. That was item 10, wasn't it? So moving on to forced performance 11. This is protecting vulnerable people. And Tim, this is your area 29.
Yeah.
Page 29 onwards. I think. To 46, which I have lost. It's here. Here we are. So again, I'll just pick out one or two things, if I may. And if I start on page 30 with, right person. Yes. I think it'd be good just to say a word again, for us probably to say quite a bit around this over the next period of time, because it's coming in. It's a matter of national concern, and the public have raised things with me, as I'm sure they've done with yourselves, as to how we get that right. And I know we're doing it in a phased way and in a gentle way, but if you could just say something around that again, about the move from phase 1 to phase 2.
So, I mean, in essence, right care, right person, it is primarily about making sure that policing resources are focused on what we're here to do in society, which is in essence keeping the king's peace and preventing and detecting crime. And I think that, you know, when we talk to the public, that's absolutely what the public expects us to do. It is a fact that over a significant period of time, and I would, you know, really point to the last decade, but probably beyond that, the last 10 or 15 years, the mission policing has expanded, and there's been real mission creep in terms of us picking up the pieces of other functions. 3 of those are, you know, clear here about dealing with concerns for welfare where there is no immediate threat to life, dealing with people who walk out of hospitals because they either don't feel they need treatment anymore or they're fed up of waiting, and dealing with mental health issues, again, where there's no immediate threat to life, be it to the lives of other people or to the person themselves. And when you look at the volume of resources and time in South Yorkshire Police, but nationally as well, the volume, the sheer amount of police resource that is focused on those particular functions, it is entirely disproportionate. And there's no getting away from when you hear Lindsay just talking about the challenges of demand, and in particular when you look at the last few weeks where we have really high demand due to the hot weather. It's absolutely right that we as a Chief Officer team make sure that we're focused on what the public expects us to do. And right care, right person is about that. It's a national programme now, and you will hear much about this in the media over the next couple of months. It's had a particular focus in the media because of the Metropolitan Police's announcements about what they're going to do. You're right, we've done it in a phased way here. ACC Dan Thorpe, who's not here today, he leads on it from an executive team perspective, and Dan's gone to great lengths to engage with strategic leaders from all the key partner agencies to set out the extent of the issue, set out the challenge that we face as an organisation, and to make sure that we approach this in a measured way that gives partners the opportunity to be able to react. So we're doing it in a staged way. First, But as it says in the report, started on the 20th of March this year, which is when we cut out our response to just carry out welfare checks. Absolutely, if there's an immediate threat to life, to someone's welfare, we still go to that. But can you pop round and check on so-and-so, because I don't know where they are? We wouldn't necessarily do that. And in particular, where those are coming from other professional agencies, absolutely that other professional agencies should be carrying out and have the resource and the structures and processes to do that. So that's been the first phase. The next phase, which I don't put the date in there, but if I have it in my head, was the 14th of July, be right? I think that's the date for the next phase. I'd have to confirm that. But it's imminent. Imminent. Is about walkout. Sorry, my computer's just died. Is about people who walk out of hospitals. You know, we spend. You know, I when I was out on patrol earlier on this year, I went out with the grip team and we got called up to Northern General. There was 8 police cars parked outside. 8 police cars, all dealing with. I mean, some of us sometimes we were there with prisoners, which sometimes can't be avoided. But where we are, if we get called to go and deal with someone who's walked out of Northern General with a canyon in their arm, if we take them back to Northern General, if we leave them there, all we're going to do is walk away again. That's got to stop. That is not an appropriate use of police resources. We are not equipped with the skills to care for someone who's got a canyon in their arm. And more often than not, this happens because people are fed up waiting, and that is something that needs to be addressed at source by our colleagues within the NHS. So
there's a lot of conversations going on with partners and those organisations at the moment, and to make sure they understand
absolutely
what they have to do.
I think certainly the feedback that I've had, that our approach to this has been very measured. We are trying to, people said this isn't partnership working, well, we're trying to do it in partnership. This is about a realignment of the resources, and we're not making any apologies for that, because I don't, I come back to, when you look at what the purpose of the police is, it's not to go and pick up people who walked out of hospital with a canyon in their arm. It's about dealing with the issues of crime and disorder in the community, dealing with offenders and preventing crime. And we're very keen to do that. We're monitoring it, as I say, as executive level sponsorship. We have created a dedicated chief inspector's post on a temporary basis to manage the transition to this. That's a significant investment for a force this size, but we want to do it properly. We want to do it in a measured way. It takes our partners with us. It allows us to continue to build long-term relationships for the public good, but absolutely provides us with the scope to be able to realign our resources to deal with matters of crime and disorder, which is what we're here to do.
Commissioner, I think obviously Tim's talked about management of police resources and mission creep, but we represented you at the event with partners that ACC Thorpe led, and I have to say what I was struck with here that I haven't seen necessarily in other areas in the national news is the emphasis on what Tim said about who's best skilled to deal with an individual at the source. So rather than it being around management of demand, Dan's approach on behalf of South Yorkshire Police was very much around who is best placed to deal with this particular incident, and can we get back to that so that the individual gets the right care. And so that I was struck by that emphasis by
I think that's absolutely right. A police officer is not medically trained, and a police car is not an ambulance. So
and that's the guiding principle
yes.
of it, the clues in the title of right care, right person. For an individual that needs a medical intervention, the right person to give that is a healthcare professional. For an individual in a mental health crisis, a police officer may aggravate, may inflame the situation, the response to it may actually make the situation a whole lot worse. So actually fundamentally at the heart of this is making sure that the individual who needs help and support is getting the help and support from the right agency. And there will be some realignment of resources, I imagine, that might stop some of these incidents happening in the first place. Changes around waiting procedures or security may see less people walking out with cannulas in their arms and things like that. But ultimately the goal that we're really keen to stress is that this is about the right treatment for the individual who's at the heart of the call for service.
Yeah. I would think that a lot of members of the public would be astonished to find that police officers were spending quite so much time in.
So Dan's been
things like
chairing regular strategic and tactical meetings, so with sort of strategic leaders and then practitioners from across our partner agencies. So as well as sort of informing, building the policy together, implementing it, they've then been reviewing issues that have come up on a case-by-case basis. Really, practitioners can bring incidents where they say, actually we don't think this worked quite well. We have seen some really astonishing examples. For example, another public sector agency calling us because one of their members of staff hadn't turned up for work to ask us to go around and check on them. But actually that's their responsibility.
To check on the worker?
Yeah, and there was nothing to suggest that they were at risk. They just hadn't turned up for work. So could the police go and check and make sure they were okay? Well, no, that's your responsibility as the employer.
Goodness. Yeah. Yes. We need some good comms around it
we do.
As well then.
And it is a challenge because some of the national comms around it haven't really taken the right focus. No. So we're really keen to address that locally.
No, I think when they made the announcement in London, that was, if I can say so, particularly unhelpful, because it sounded as if you were going to leave people in real crisis on a pavement somewhere, and that was not good.
While we have written to our partners to sort of outline our position, that has been as a follow-up to conversations and meetings. It hasn't just been a standalone letter. Okay,
thank you very much for that. Turning on to page 31, this is 3.3.4. This is under victims' voice, putting the victims first. Knowledge gaps have been identified with operational local officers due to large areas of inexperience. And I presume this is about, well, you tell me what it is.
Well, as you know, and we've talked around it in a variety of meetings, we've recruited 1,500 police officers over the past 3 years. That now means that, you know, a significant proportion of our workforce has less than 3 years service. By far the most complex area of policing that we deal with is safeguarding and missing children, you know, missing people particularly are an area of vulnerability for us because often children go missing in very, very difficult circumstances. There are complex reasons behind it, and it's really important that our officers are trained to spot the signs of what might be behind that. So that's what we're doing, we're addressing it through CPD and products to make sure that our officers are equipped with that knowledge.
And then in 3.3.5 you list the reasons why children and young people may not engage. I mean, I presume it's very difficult to get children to engage with adults in any circumstances, but never mind about these. But yeah, okay. Page 32, if I can, 3.3.15. There have also been independent domestic violence advocates, IDVAs, appointed in Barnsley and Sheffield with specific responsibility to engage with older people, and that was Ministry of Justice funding. I just thought that was good, and just thought I'd point that out. So that is a good thing.
That came on specifically after we'd rolled out the domestic abuse matters training, because one of the case studies involved in that was around an older couple, and it was a real insightful moment for the practitioners there about we concentrate a lot on younger people and other sort of hard to reach, hard to hear groups, but hadn't really thought about the age profile of our DA victims and offenders before that point.
It was a particularly harrowing case study, I think it was from Hampshire, wasn't it? An older couple, and it actually turned out when you got behind it, this had been going on for years and years and years.
Yeah, okay. Over the page 33, 3.3.16, as part of the wider area of VORG, but still focusing on capturing victims' voices, work is ongoing to ensure improvements are made around the trust and confidence victims have, and this will apply to all victims, including older survivors of such offending. A current initiative is ongoing to revisit victims of VORG. I wondered if you had any, is there anything that you could let us have on that? I'd be interested to know how that's going, what's happened there.
I can certainly come back to you on that. I can make some inquiries, yeah.
Okay, then. And just a bit lower down, talks about 3.3.20, encompass, now encompassing nurseries as well as schools. I thought that was good as well. To just remind us about encompass and.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, Operation Encompasses, it's recognising that, you know, often a child, the person that they will have, or the organisation that they will have most contact with, is particularly if they're within that age group, is the educational establishment that they attend. And it's really, really important that that establishment understands what's going on at home. That then informs that trauma-informed approach, particularly if they're witnessing changes in the child's behaviour and things like that at school as a result of what they're witnessing at home. And as I say, well, I mean, it took some time to get Encompass in place right across the county, but that's now been achieved and seems to be delivering some successes in that regard.
Yeah, I must say when I first knew about Encompass, and it was I just assumed nurseries were part of it, but apparently not then. So now they are. Just on that number in 3.3.20, 645 referral figures in March in 1 month. Seems high, but I've got no way of judging whether that's high or not.
Bear in mind that if you look at the volume of domestic abuse offences and incidents that we deal with across the course of the month, more often than not children will be present, so that's not particularly out of kilter.
And of course more than one child per household. 34, if we go to that, 3.4.5, modern slavery. Again, I just wonder if you could say expand a little bit on that. What the trends are currently as you see them.
So I suppose the biggest issue for us around modern slavery these days is about county lines, and in particular young children being exploited in terms of becoming involved in drugs running, county lines, dealing drugs on behalf of organised crime groups. That's what we see most of all these days.
Okay, thank you. And on to 36, 3.4.22, addictions, vulnerable adults, and talking there about gambling. It's not very often we talk about gambling addiction, and I'm just interested in that.
Well, it's something that we're starting to explore and to try and understand the impact of that. It's one I think that we genuinely don't know, but particularly when you look at economy, financial impact at the moment, the impact of someone who's got a gambling addiction, perhaps then being drawn into as a vulnerable person, being influenced, potential to be drawn into crime. It's important to understand more about that.
So the suspicion is it's getting worse.
I wouldn't say that at the
growing.
moment. I wouldn't say that. I think it's something that we don't understand properly at the moment, and it's important that we do.
I think there's been some attention paid to it nationally recently following an inquest, and it was a young man who I think came from the Sheffield area. Forgive me, I can't remember his name, but his parents have been doing some campaigning about greater recognition around gambling addiction and its impact, particularly on young men and their mental health.
There's a campaign to try and stop football clubs accepting sponsorship from
Well, we'll see what we can dig out around that.
It's the first time it's been recorded on a death certificate last week, so it was actually made it on there that someone committed suicide as a result of a gambling addiction, and that there's been quite a lot of media interest, as Marm alluded to, based on that.
Okay, thank you. And on same page, 3.5.3, a drug death coordinator role has been approved. Just thought that was good. Just thought I'd flag that up here. So, thank you. So we're not all about negative things, Lindsay. Sometimes we have positives. So on page 37, same sorts of things. I thought they were just interesting. 3.6.6, what the free text that children were responding to. I found in those comments, I was previously let down by those comments down there, 1, 2, the third one down, I feel worried about police resources doing something more important as a reason for, it's kind of hit home with people that police resources are very stretched. it does seem a shame if that then leads some people to think, well, I won't bother the police, won't trouble the police, but it's just interesting. That's all.
And yeah, I think that I think most people understand that we have finite resources and that they're all spread across a range of different challenges, and you know, I'll often be heard saying that it's our job to spread finite resources across a range of issues, all of which are unpalatable to the public. I think we're really clear that protecting, you know, in terms of our priorities, protecting vulnerable people is right at the top of that, and where people are a victim of crimes where they're vulnerable, absolutely will be taken seriously, and absolutely will aim to problem solve whatever has happened to them and deal with the issues.
Thank you. And the last question, well, comment I got is on page 42, 3.7.11. Good Sam. We referenced Good Sam here before. If you could just say a word about what's the position there, how that's going.
You know, one of the key strands of our organisation development is to develop more technical solutions. Good Sam is effectively a video platform where we can talk to people face to face using technology that will allow us in certain situations to be able to assess, allow us to gather evidence from the scene because it's recorded, and actually be able to assess the nature of the risk. We might be able to resolve the problem using that platform alone, and it will allow us to deal with things more effectively. That's a new piece of technology that we're developing and intend to roll out further as we move forward.
Okay. Thank you very much. That was everything then on, everything I've got on 11. Did anybody else have any questions or comments? Okay. Shall we go to 12 then, missing from home update? Ben, this is why you've come. 47 to 52. I mean, do you just want to say a word about it? It's quite a short report. Do you just want to say a word about what you've put here?
Yeah, so thank you, Commissioner. So I'm here today in my role as a strategic lead for vulnerability, which includes within it missing as one of the areas of business. And this report follows a request from yourself, Commissioner, to reattend and explore some of the links around missing and vulnerability and their details throughout the report. The report provides an overview of some of the structures in which we deal with missing and how we identify specific vulnerability within there. So 3.1.1 we talk about the exploitation and tactical groups that take place within each of the district areas. These are multi-agency partnership meetings where we review specifically vulnerable people or people who are vulnerable from within that cohort and put in place multi-agency intervention plans with a view to supporting them and removing some of that vulnerability. The report also highlights that we've seen an increase in the use of police protective powers. So this is where a child, someone under the age of 18, is deemed to be at immediate risk of harm, and the police have the ability to take that individual for a short period of time away from the person with parental responsibility and work with partners to put them in a safe space. We have seen an increase in that over the past 18 months. However, we don't believe that's because more children are at risk. We believe that's because we've been effectively training our staff through Child Matters and other initiatives that you'll have already heard a lot about to identify some of these risks and allow us to take really effective interventions. We do adopt a problem-solving approach to missing people, and you'll see over on the page that that we have seen reductions in missing. So we are seeing an overall reduction of around 762 missing reports in the previous year, which is really positive. And that's down to some of our intervention problem solving. So apologies, I'm on 3.2.4. That's down to some of our problem solving approaches with partners in local authority, the work we're doing around some of the repeat locations. Notwithstanding, there's still some more that we can do, and I highlight that at the end of the report. We have noticed an increase in repeat missing, so that's where an individual goes missing on more than one occasion, and we have seen the number of people missing but repeat increase, and that's down to some quite acute challenges around some individuals and their unwillingness to engage with services, or some of the significant challenges that they've got within their life, and perhaps needing a really long-term and ingrained multi-agency approach to address some of their challenges and some of the drivers that prevent them going missing. You'll see that I touch on systems within the report.
Sorry, can I just
intervene
at that point? Are these all Sheffield children we're talking about, or South Yorkshire children, or are they coming in from other boroughs or other parts of the country?
So we have, so obviously the people within this report all relate to people who've been reported missing from within the South Yorkshire area. Their location of origin is really dependent. The vast majority will be people from within South Yorkshire who've gone missing in South Yorkshire. We do occasionally have people who are residents within other areas who might be visiting areas of South Yorkshire that go missing, or alternatively people who are within the local authority care system and that may be housed within South Yorkshire but perhaps don't originate from that area.
But those within that system, they're not a significant number then, though?
They will form a part of that, but they're certainly not a significant part of that.
Okay.
So you'll see that at 3.2.6 I highlight within there some of the flags. So we have a flagging system on our compact system. That's the computer system that actually manages missing people for us as an organisation. And that highlights within there, and it feeds in something Mr. Forbes said earlier around county lines and the risk around particularly young males being exploited. And we are seeing that the people who are often recorded with the most risk are young males aged 14 to 17 years, with it being at risk of criminal exploitation or risk of being reported repeatedly missing. And that's increasing, and I think that's twofold. The first part I'd say about that is it's increasing because we're becoming more aware of some of the risks. Historically, we focused heavily around child sexual exploitation, and that had been a really prominent risk. And as a country, as we've become more aware of some of the criminal exploitations, and as county lines has become increased awareness and prominence, we're seeing that we're responding to that as an organisation and recognising that risk. So whilst we have seen an increase, I think that's a positive reflection of the work we've done as an organisation to recognise and flag that appropriately. In terms of the specific links to CSE and vulnerability, in 3.3, I've covered a number of different areas in there. There are times, so an area perhaps for us to focus on is around 3.3.4, which is prevention interviews, and you touched on it earlier, Commissioner, around some of the challenges we have in engaging with particularly young people who've been missing and identifying what has happened whilst they've been missing, what were the pull factors for them to go missing, and how can we intervene and prevent that in the future. An overleaf at 3.3.7, you'll see that it highlights some of the comments that were made, and we touched on that in the previous vulnerability report, but you'll see that our experience anecdotally is that partners often get a better response and get better engagement through some of the young missing people, and we're working really hard to work with partners in each of the local authorities to share information following someone being missing.
Where return to home interviews are conducted, what's the governance arrangement around that? How does that work? So
within the police, every time a person is reported missing to the police, we will conduct a return home interview, and that will be governed through our local inspectors and the individual officers. So the officer will attend, they will complete a form which provides them questions to ask, and seeks to adduce as much information as possible from the missing person to understand why they went missing, if there's anything we can do to support them, where they were when they were missing, and if there's been any crime or anything that we need to subsequently investigate. So
there's a kind of template for that then?
Yeah, there's a template and a guidance, but obviously it's very much officer-led with that individual and the training.
Am I right in thinking that those used to be done by Barnados in South Yorkshire?
So we do that. The local authority has a duty to do a return interview within 72 hours of anyone under the age of 18 who goes missing. They're usually done by dedicated teams within the local authority. Historically, some authorities used organisations like Barnados to do those, but in the main, these are done by a local authority. And those interviews, again, are very similar in terms of some of the questions, but perhaps might receive a different reception because they've had a period of cooling off between the time missing and when they're engaged the second time. We do work with the local authorities in each of the individual areas to share information across so that we can build a really whole picture. That may trigger a strategy meeting if it's a particularly young person on their third occasion missing, or if the officer deems or the professional deems one's required, and at that point we'd have a sit down with all agencies and stakeholders and really come up with a thorough plan.
So SYP didn't employ Bernardo directly then? That was
not to my
the local authority?
I think maybe, but before my time. I seem to recall something about it, but certainly not since 2017.
And it would not be something that other forces do?
Again, I think in years gone by when there was
But not,
money around to do that, then it's something that
so it's
forces
a money thing possibly, is it?
Potentially employed charities to do.
Yeah.
Well, I think money and actually having the right skill set as well. Yeah, that kind
Well, I
of
just wondered if
skills.
there is a resistance to speaking to police officers, whether that's something that should be looked at or might be.
So I'd say that and articulate that any young person under the age of 18 will be given a return home interview by the local authority, which is not done by a police officer. No. It's done generally by someone with a social work background or specifically a social worker, and also the police. So hopefully across there we've got a broad spectrum of people that feel comfortable to engage in.
And there are different moments in time, those?
Most definitely, yes. Yeah. So just looking further at the report, so 3.3.9 highlights some work that's ongoing nationally in another force area that is looking at a triage system to missing people. So we're watching that with interest to understand a little bit more about that, and that's taking a more holistic approach around who's the best person to locate that missing person, be that the person with parental responsibility, be that someone in the local authority, or be that the police. And that's articulated in there, but that's very much early days at this moment in time, and we're still watching that with some interest. We do have effective governance around missing people, and that's articulated in 3.3.11. So that looks like we have a tactical meeting with practitioners. That lines into a vulnerability governance group, which I chair, and that then lines into the strategic vulnerability and assurance group, which Mount Pullman, ACC Pullman chairs. So in conclusion, we do have effective partnerships at all 4 local authorities. We do have good links between vulnerability and missing, and we are very alive to that, and the report articulates that throughout. We have undertaken a bit of a review of our missing function internally, and we have identified some areas for improvement which are listed within there, which is around ensuring consistency across each of the missing teams within the district, or the missing functions and what they're doing. Identifying effective problem solving with an evidence base behind it, so we have a disparate approach to problem solving dependent on the locality where it occurs, so capturing best practice and really building that to sustain and continue some of the successes we've had. And we are developing a BI performance tool which will collate some of the missing data that we've got and bring that to the fore for district command teams to really help drive down into some of the detail and help continue to improve and sustain our missing person performance.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, I think that covers the ground very well, and all the questions I've got are answered. So,
may I ask? How critical to the work you're doing is the relationship with the local authority dedicated office of the LADO?
Most definitely, and we do engage with LADO at a really tactical level on a regular basis around some of the specific mission challenges that we have. So,
do you engage with the LADOs individually, authority by authority, or do you bring the 4 LADOs from each district together so that there's a coherence in the overall approach across the county?
My understanding is that the LADOs are all engaged at a local level, and that's then collated together within a safeguarding structure. I would go away and I can go away and confirm that for you in terms of exact.
I suppose the question is whether there would be any benefit in ensuring that the 4 LADOs work consistently and together, rather than there's 4 separate entities with each, responsibility in their own boroughs. That's the question, really.
I will come back with an answer.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Does this does right care, right person relate to this?
No. No, it's probably a too simplistic answer. There will be elements of individuals that are within the right care, right person framework. For example, as Mr. Forber alluded to, people who might go leave a hospital with a cannula in their arm and have previously been reported missing, whereas now there might be more of a robust assessment as to who's the right resource to manage that situation and provide the best care for that person. So that will undoubtedly have an impact in some of this data, but I don't see it at this moment in time as being a significant impact.
Okay, thank you. Shall we move then to 13, which is Budget Monitoring Report, 53 to 62. Debbie, take us to the highlights.
Okay, this is the Outtum report for the financial year 22-23. So if I focus on the high-level numbers before our historic legacy issues and the reserve adjustments, we are reporting an underspend of 0.3 million, which is 0.01% of the budget. I think it's the closest I've ever known. Now within that there are lots of underspends and overspends, and they are explained throughout the report. What I do need to just highlight though is we found ourselves at the end of the year with surplus poker, proceeds of crime act income and safety camera ticketing partnership income. So we've created an earmarked reserve for those funds so that they can be reinvested into eligible activity. What that does mean now is by creating that reserve, what we are saying now really is we've got an overspend of 0.71 million, which is still only 0.24% of the budget. It has taken us into a slight overspend position. However, not a cause for concern because we do know that we've got underspend on capital financing within the PCC budget. So when we look at the complete picture, that more than offsets that overspend position. So a challenging and unpredictable year due to the economic uncertainty. I don't think no surprises there for all of us. It has created significant fluctuations and challenges for us throughout the year. Through close monitoring, we have made good use of underspends as they have arisen. We've managed to direct revenue finance some resources into the Oracle project. That is a real key project for us. A significant investment into an enterprise resource planning system. That will deliver transformational change across the organisation. Earlier in the year we were seeing difficulty attracting our police constable degree apprenticeship pipeline and projecting an increase in officer leavers. So we flexed the workforce plan, we increased our degree entry holder programme candidates and invested in detective NED. We've seen underspends in staff pay, a number of reasons there. There have been some delays in recruiting, but there's also been difficulty recruiting. And we have seen underspends in other areas, some of it down to effective contract management, so that has delivered some underspend on supplies and services. And we have been able to identify some permanent savings as well as we've gone through the year, and they have contributed to our savings plan this year. And we've also benefited from some additional income and grant funding. One thing I didn't mention there as well around the pay side of things, despite having some difficulties recruiting, we did exceed our police uplift programme target. So that was really, that was a real success story for us.
Yep.
I think I've covered the key points.
I think you've probably have. I don't know whether there's a giant comment at all, Steve?
The main comment is that we've watched this through the year and seen how difficult it is. We're completely assured that everything's being managed as well as it can be. I mean, I particularly like the underspend on agency, so something's gone right there. And an overachievement of income, I quite like that as well. So there's some stuff that is going really well, despite the difficulties that we've all experienced throughout the year.
I know what you say about the underspend being 0.01% of the budget. When I was at school once, I got 99 out of 100 for a history exam, and I went home very proud of this, and my father said, "What about the 1%?" And I went, "Oh, God." But no, that was remarkable. Yes.
See what I can do this year.
No pressure. No pressure. Don't send it the
No
wrong way,
pressure.
Debbie.
Well, as one of our favourite MPs always goes on about the underspend, I'll wait for his comment on that. Was there anything else at all on the...
Well, Sophie wants to...
Oh, Sophie, yes. Sophie, do you have a comment at all? Or?
I don't really... Oops, sorry, my camera's not working. I don't really have a comment. Just, I suppose everything to say is I think it's been a really good year for the force in terms of managing the budget. It's been difficult. As Debbie said, it's been a particularly difficult year for inflation and things like that. But overall, we did have an underspend in the consolidated position, but that was largely due to legacy and Section 31 grants that we got in for partnerships and commissioning. So, yeah, well done, Debbie, in the force.
Yes, absolutely.
I suppose just finally, I realise I focused on revenue and then I haven't mentioned capital and don't want to spoil that. We have seen some slippage and this is nothing new for us. We have had this over a number of years, but it is improving and I think that is through tighter monitoring and scrutiny and you know the way Sophie, Jackie and myself work and we do bring that greater scrutiny to the process and we are challenging where we can. We did end the year, I think we spent around 75% of the budget, so about 13.4 million against a 17.8 million pound budget. So not quite on target, but certainly you see an improvement year on year.
Yeah, and that close scrutiny of the projects is working really, so that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that. Next year it's the sunny uplands. Right, thank you. That was item 13, Chief Executive reporting, PCC Decisions, item 14, Michelle, 64.
Yeah, Commissioner, there's 5 decisions since the last report. I wasn't going to highlight any of them in particular, given the items on the agenda, unless Force colleagues want to.
No,
thank you.
Okay. Oh. Okay. So that was 14. 15, the work programme, Michelle, 6566.
Yes, as usual, the next 3 meetings are set out there in terms of what's on the agenda, and I work closely with the Deputy Chief Constable to programme in reports going forward, so there's nothing to highlight specifically.
Everybody happy with that? Okay. So assurance reports, we have an IEP Independent Ethics Panel report, 67 to 72, and the Chair is here. Michael, do you want to say a brief word about your report?
Yes, very briefly. This is actually a report that we brought to the IEP in March, and trying to sum up, what we're trying to do is to see the extent to which we can offer you assurance when we look at your priorities, the values and behaviour framework, and fit overall. And how does that actually hang together in terms of the mechanisms that lie in South Yorkshire Police to check internally? And essentially this is focusing on 3 areas: stop and search, the use of force, and as a subset of that, the use of force brackets taser. And there are, as you know, external panels recruited from the public, which are now vigorous, that sit alongside the internal panels that operate within SYP as a whole. And the questions that we're keen to ask are, is this effective as a scrutiny mechanism? It's not inspection, you have endless inspection. But in terms of what the force itself is looking at internally, and the extent to which the force is now confident to invite lay members of the public to do the same, and try to capture that work in motion. And I think we're in a position to say that, generally speaking, the culture, as it is perceived, is of a confident willingness to engage the public, to invite the public to be challenging and robust, and where there's a temptation to think they may be asking soft questions, actually is your chief inspectors and inspectors who are running these meetings on a regular basis who are pointing out issues that from a professional point of view they would like the public to be aware of. And exactly the same process is operating internally. How do we know? Well, the members, IEP members report, I personally have been able to attend external and internal scrutiny panels. This morning, as recently as this morning, internal scrutiny on use of force involving 10, 11 members of SYP, looking at body-worn video, which is now almost standard practice. That's a huge step forward over the last several years, and interrogating whether the quality of what they were seeing was what you would expect. And where there were reservations, officers being very challenging, but very professional in terms of, we think this or that could be better. This evening I'm going to an external panel, which is the use of force taser, which I think is the second of those meetings. The first attracted over 30 members of the public who went through some basic information training and then again watched in real time body-worn video of the use of taser, and then were encouraged to ask not only the obvious but some very searching questions. So what I can say at this stage is that those scrutiny mechanisms seem to be effective. We'd like to bring back at a later date to PAB some of the other scrutiny work which doesn't involve members of the public, but for example the work we're doing with PSD in relation to vetting, misconduct, complaints, and issues to do with EDI, equality, diversity and inclusion. And roll in with that probably the work of the independent advisory panel on the policing of protest, which hopefully doesn't have to do too much work. So that's really what's summed up in 3 or 4 pages, and if anybody's got any questions, or if you have, I'll try and answer them.
Any questions from the force at all?
If I could just add, I'm sorry to...
No, I mean just a comment, obviously, I mean I'm at the forefront of the interaction with the IEP. Our view is dead straightforward, unfettered access, and we try and give that wherever we can. And we want to be as transparent as possible, and I think that when I chat to colleagues up and down the country, I think that the scrutiny mechanisms that we've got now are as good as anything that I hear about from colleagues up and down the country. Our view, I'm sure the Chief will back me up on this, is it's fundamental to policing by consent. What we have the opportunity for members of the public to scrutinise what we do and scrutinise the issues that are the most controversial, that can, if you get it wrong, cause the most issues with the community.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The one area that I would highlight is that we are still not as successful as we would like to be in involving younger members of the community, and particularly members of the, I'll just use the term non-white communities. We have a way to go. Everybody's aware of that, but we haven't cracked the way to do that so that the legitimacy is genuinely spread across the age ranges, and particularly that age range from 18 to 34 that tends to attract the greatest proportion of police activity in the areas that we've looked at. So we've got work to do. We're trying that.
We can just supplement what Michael and Tim have said, Commissioner. When others have looked at what we do here around scrutiny, including HMIC FRS that's brought us in relation to inspections, they've been struck by what our evaluation scrutiny officers, including Sharon and the IEP members, have brought in terms of, if you take body-worn video footage as an example, we will sit alongside force colleagues who will be looking at different things from different perspectives. So force colleagues, we've observed, have looked at, is this interaction procedurally correct? What we've been able to discuss with the force, and the force have come on themselves rather than having us add to that, is how will that individual feel as a result of that interaction, especially when they're from a member of a different community that feels that there is disproportionality, or there is actual disproportionality according to the data. So we've had those conversations, and others that have visited us have been struck by that different layer, those different layers and different perspectives that we introduce to scrutiny mechanisms.
Well, that's good to know, and I hear what you're saying insofar as you work along with the IEP, and of course it has to be, the relationship has to be built both ways, and I think the IEP members have been very good in the way that you have interacted with the force. So.
I think it'd be fair to say that the 5 of us who are involved in IEP feel we are actively encouraged to get involved. And that, I think, is on a basis of trust that has been established over time. I'm obviously saying things with an eye to the future, because I think if the view is that there is something being added here, then it's probably worth ensuring that it continues. It's come as a surprise to the newer members of the panel, the extent to which there is active encouragement from SYP to do this work. And reflecting on where we were in 2015, 2016, the force has been on a journey. And of course we're underpinned by your office, that does a lot of the heavy lifting.
We've all been on journeys, I think. Yeah. Well, that's a good note to bring our meeting towards its end. We're not quite there. Any other business? Which should have been notified. Nothing was, so it should be the end. So thank you very much, everybody. I'm off to meet the good people of Crosspool and Crooks now in a community meeting, and they will tell me what you're not doing right, so I'll bring that back. Okay, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.